If you handed me a hue card of Clash Force, I would legit think this is an old TurboGrafx 16 game I'd never heard of. It reminds me of something like Shockman, or even the more recent FX Unit Yuki. For those who aren't familiar with those titles, you know how Kid Dracula feels like Castlevania mixed with Mega Man? Clash Force feels like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles mixed with Contra. And you'd swear it was based on a cartoon you'd see on Saturday mornings in the 90s, like Clash Force came on between Street Sharks and Cowboys of Moo Mesa. Anyway, the game itself starts out with the city being besieged by the forces of the hilariously named Crackman. Crackman. And the only ones that can save the day are the eponymous Clash Force. You choose between Voom, Scorpedo, and Ekid. Ekid? Ekid? You don't get any of their backstory, but you don't need it. They've got rifles, they can continuously fire while doing multiple forward flips. They're legit. Now run right and murder all the bad robots. Clash Force has you fighting your way through 21 stages in the familiar platformer setup. You have 3 normal levels, then a boss fight level, and then you move on to another area. The settings include forest base, underground area, fortress area, desert area, and desert base. Like a lot of old TurboGrafx games, Clash Force's graphics are simple and tend to lack animation, but all of the colors are super bright. I'm not pointing out the lack of animation to say that the game looks bad, just simple. There's still a lot of cool graphical touches. I really like the parallax scrolling in the forest base and the fortress area, and a really cool touch was the screen gets progressively darker the further you get into the second level of the underground area. It shows how you're getting deeper into the cave system. The controls are spot on. They feel just as good as any of the action platformers from the late 80s, early 90s, and the hitboxes are tight and on point. Every time I got hit, I knew it was my fault. No cheap difficulty here. But because the game feels so familiar, it's a little off-putting that you can't fire your weapon up or down. You don't have to. The game was designed for left-right shooting only, but I'd still find myself hitting up and down trying to hit enemies above or below me. Speaking of shooting, there's a myriad of different power-ups for you to collect. You start with your basic machine gun, which is actually pretty useful. It sucks to lose your power-up, but Clash Force doesn't make you feel like you're being punished for taking damage, at least not as much as other platformers. Along with your standard blaster, you also have a purple wave laser, dual orange laser, green spread shot, and flame spread shot. I don't think the other types of weapon have different damage values. They do have faster rates of fire, but it felt like the only time I was doing more damage was when I was hitting enemies with more projectiles. Pro tip, stick with the Mega Spread Shot Flamethrower of Death. It's the best weapon in the game, with the green spread shot being as a close second. Also, the ZR trigger is an auto fire button. It's not in the tutorial, and I didn't find this out until I was fighting the last boss and I accidentally hit the controller against my leg. Unlike Contra, you do have a life bar in this game. You get 3 hit points at the outset, and you can pick up a shield to absorb 1 hit from an enemy. I know 1 additional hit point doesn't sound like much, but it's super useful as getting hit means losing your power up. I'm a little conflicted when it comes to the music. It's good for the most part, but a little generic at times. It does some interesting things that show there's effort put into the soundtrack, like there's inclusion of banjo in the desert area, but I can't remember any of the tracks after turning the game off. And there are a couple of tracks that aren't looped properly. You'll get this really clunky restart mid-level when the track ends. Other than that, Clash Force has some balancing issues. Basically, anytime you control your forward progression, it's easy. Anytime you're on an auto-scrolling level, the difficulty spikes. It doesn't become unplayable, but it's where you're going to die the most. Especially in the Contra 3 homage level where you're jumping from missile to missile. But it doesn't ruin the experience, you can still finish the game in an afternoon. Clash Force isn't a killer app, but you should absolutely pick it up. Here recently I put dozens of hours into Chaos Bane, Godfall, Immortals, and Ys 9. There's a link to those reviews in the pinned comment, by the way. Clash Force hit at just the right time for me. It's a great little retro-inspired platformer with a ton of heart. It's perfect for when you have a few minutes to kill, especially on the Switch, or if you just need a palate cleanser from the plethora of games that take tens of hours to complete. Pick it up today.